Thinking aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Our topic today is money and psychic functioning. Who better to be with me than Nancy du Tertre, who is not only a practicing psychic, but also a corporate lawyer and the author of Psychic Intuition, Everything You Wanted to Know But Were Afraid to Ask. And she is the author of How to Talk to an Alien. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Now, this will be an interesting topic because I'm sure we both have our own issues around money and psychic functioning. You know, many years ago, I interviewed a philosopher, Jacob Needleman, wonderful philosopher, and he wrote a book about money. And from a philosophical perspective, he said it's so deep, it's even more profound than sex for many people, that we have, you know, lots of taboos about discussing sex, but now people talk about sex all the time. They're still afraid to talk about money.
Yeah, that's true. Although I think most psychologists will say that all money issues probably go back to sex issues.
Well, it has
or power issues.
It has to do with self-esteem as well.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people engaged in psychic work, such as yourself, there is a feeling that money kind of it's like it contaminates it. I mean, ideally, I think most psychics would wish to be able to do this work for free.
I think it depends who you talk to. Certainly, everybody would like to have a lot of money.
Yeah.
I think that's, and if they could figure out how to do it by using these psychic skills, which, by the way, don't require training unless you do it the hard way, which is the way I did it.
Yeah.
You just have this natural thing, and if you can make money, I think people are all kind of excited about that. But I think when you talk to really serious natural psychics, people are kind of born this way, and they see things, and it comes that easily, and they know that it's a form of a service that they just want to give it. They want to share it. So money doesn't play a part in that.
But we all need to eat. We all need shelter.
Yes.
we all need financial resources of one kind or another. There's no escaping it on the physical plane here.
You know what? I agree with you. It took me years, many years, to get the courage to charge people for this kind of work. And my husband always says, come on, raise your rates, because he enjoys money. He works hard for his money, and he'd like to, you know, he sort of sees it as a similar type of service or sort of a commodity, the same in what he deals with. And it's not. It's not, and I have always, once I finally made the decision to charge something for my work, because I figured at least it's my time, which it is. My time is valuable.
Yes.
I don't think that anybody would argue. And on top of that, I have spent countless years, let's say decades, training, you know, with people in order to do what I do with a certain amount of competency.
Yeah.
So usually, I mean, being a lawyer, you go through law school, you pass your bar, you get licensed, and you know, you've sort of paid your dues. And as I was told in law school, you know, if all your friends, they said all your friends and relatives are going to come out of the woodwork and they're going to all want free legal advice. So, and they said, don't give it to them. Now, maybe that's not a good idea. But then again, I mean, the point was, you have to value this, whether you want to call it a gift or a skill, whatever it is you've acquired. So I've learned how to do it, but I have purposely kept my fees low to the point where I figure two things. Everybody can afford it, okay? And the second thing is that there are an awful lot of people who will get in touch with you when they find out that you do psychic work, and they kind of have an expectation that you owe them. And you ought to just give it to them for nothing. Sometimes I make people pay a small fee. Literally, it's to put their money where their mouth is. If they don't show me that they are willing to pay something, it means they have an emotional issue attached to getting something for free.
Yeah.
And I won't tolerate that.
And many people say they don't value it if they're not paying something for it.
Well, that's the other thing. And of course, if you look at all the people who become major TV psychics and whatever, and their fees, they generally suddenly get jacked up to about, $800 an hour, which frankly is a lot more than I have ever made as an attorney on an hourly basis. And what is it that they're doing that's that much more valuable? I mean, as an attorney, you're doing something predictive,
right?
And they're predicting, but what is that other than people believe that you're handing them something magical and they're willing to pay for magic? And I respect people too much to take advantage of that desire for magic. What I'm offering them is something that's a combination of all of my skills, all my knowledge, and all of my best intentions. And to me, and that is a service to somebody.
Well, no, last year, if I recall correctly, yes, last year we did an interview on psychic work in criminology. And as I recall, you made a point of saying when you work with police departments, you never charge them.
Correct. Right, because that's more of a, I don't know, it's a civil service duty thing or whatever. I mean, you're particularly in matters, and as I think I probably pointed out, they're usually homicides. So they're very high emotions, and if you care about people, you do it for them.
Yeah. There are a lot of people who are drawn to that work. Well, I don't want to say a lot. There are people who have a specialty in working in the law enforcement arena. And for the most part, unless the police are willing to bring you on as an officer and so they can put you on the payroll, they would have a hard time justifying to, the city council and whoever that they're paying a psychic.
Yeah, they don't want to pay psychic. That's because they have to report to the public.
And which is true, I think, about all kinds of organizations where there's a lot of accountability. There's a stigma still attached to being psychic, and organizations are simply unwilling. People in organizations are unwilling to take the risk of, standing up and saying, I think we should spend the money this way.
Right. And the thing is that you don't really know. It's that old problem of getting the feedback or the confirmations on the psychic data that you're giving.
Right.
If anybody can say anything all the time.
Yeah. And anybody can claim to be a psychic. There's no official licensing or accreditation.
Well, some people say that there is, but frankly, no.
Yeah.
No. That's ridiculous. I mean, train, be disciplined, do it as much as you can, do it in good faith, work with people who are excellent, and you'll get better. But certification, no. Really? That makes me crazy. But what you do is if you offer something in the way of information, people have to trust that what you're offering is not just the scattergun stuff or related to your ego in terms of, well, I told the police, they got to do X, Y, and Z, and or I told the victim's family. That's worse. When you get really kind of crazy people who they'll say anything,
right? And
because people want to buy magic, they'll pay for it.
Well, there's a huge industry out there, and I think particularly in cultures, let's say third world countries and so on, where witchcraft is considered very much part of the local milieu.
Right.
Shamans and sorcerers and brujos and witches of every type charge for their services. On the
well, you have John of God down in Brazil. Apparently now, I've never seen him. I've known people who...
Nor have I, but we're talking about a very famous healer.
Right. And I think psychic surgeon also, which is what the Brazilians are kind of known for.
Yes.
And as far as I know, he doesn't charge. However, he does recommend that you follow up with certain herbal treatments or other types of, and you do pay for whatever those are. It's a little bit like the popcorn stand, sorry. You know, the movie might be cheap, but you're going to pay at the concession stand.
Pay for the popcorn.
Yeah. So, I mean, people have ways of kind of working around the money issues.
It's very interesting how that works. Now, on the other hand, there are some people who say this is a spiritual gift. It's not coming from you. It's coming from a spiritual source. And therefore, it should be offered for free. And there are people who do. I mean, who consider it spiritual work, and they manage their financial needs some other way, and they just give of themselves.
Yeah, and I know many people like that, and I admire them. People wear themselves out when they do that, because everybody will come to them because they want something for free. And
particularly with healers, I have heard that you can get burned out because as your reputation as a healer grows, you're going to be constantly bombarded by more and more people who are in misery and are asking for your help.
Yeah. And I remember reading someplace, there was some psychic, I forget who said, if you get exhausted by doing this kind of work, then you're not really doing the work. You should probably feel invigorated, and energized after you're doing real psychic work. And to some extent that's true, but you also were putting in, a piece of your life is going in there. And your energy, your focus, your concentration, and if you are really projecting out to help somebody in some way, and I won't get into the specifics of that, but if you're doing that, it does take energy, and it is exhausting. Should you get paid for it? I mean, as I said, I think you're entitled to something. I think people who bring their prices up really high because they can, they're not doing it right, because it is a spiritual service.
Well, now let's talk about the flip side for a moment, and that's not about charging people, but about using your abilities for speculating in the financial markets, or for wagering in horse races or athletic events, and so on. We both know Marty Rosenblatt and his Applied Precognition Project. I've interviewed him several times here for New Thinking Aloud. And here you have a group of people who have been working continuously now for about a decade, making small bets, not large ones, small bets in the financial markets and in the sports betting arena, and have a track record, which I think is impressive overall, of about 60% on their wagers, where you'd only expect 50% by chance over a 10-year period. And they're very much aware of the fact that when the bets get large, when people start winning or losing significant amounts of money, it creates an emotional cloud that interferes.
I'm not so sure about the emotional cloud of, if a large amount of money is involved, so you better get it right. I mean, that's a lot of pressure.
Well, not just the pressure, but the excitement about now, like, for example, Keith Harari, who was a remote viewer who worked with Russell Targ, and his very first silver futures experiment using the ARV protocol, got 9 hits in a row. They made $100,000 or more for themselves. And Keith said, I've interviewed him, he said, I felt like the goose that laid the golden egg. And the second time they did it, after that, he had 9 misses in a row.
What I'm discovering, because I do Marty's regular weekly viewings.
Yes, okay? You're involved with that.
Yeah. And what I've discovered recently, there's a thing that, there's a term for it now, I've forgotten. It was J.B. Ryan used this term when he was talking about, sort of when you have a 50-50 chance of anything, the binary sort of choice,
right.
Is it up, down, heads, tails, black, red, whatever. And there is a term when you go into a losing streak that beats probability.
Psi missing.
Thank you.
That's the term. And what it means is that at a subconscious level, your mind is getting the correct information, and then somehow you block it and do the opposite.
Correct. Now, I'm really concerned that that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because I do have an issue with money. I particularly have an issue with money when it involves, somebody else who's basically going to place a bet on whatever it is that I have produced for them.
And in remote viewing, you get what's called displacement, which is like psi missing, a very accurate description of the wrong target.
Yes, and that has been going on and on and on and on.
It's one of the big bugaboos for remote viewing in general. It's like displacement is the mind's way of saying, yes, I'm psychic, but you can't have it.
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, what other conclusion can there be other than, because really I've looked at the odds for streaks, whether they be winning streaks or losing streaks, and how many total bets or whatever you want to say you have to place and what should be expected. Yeah. I'm going well beyond that. Yeah. And what's that about? Clearly, some part of me is not happy, I think. Yeah. I mean, what other explanation could there be?
I started the conversation by suggesting that money is a very deep issue for people. Years ago, I used to be very interested in ARV for financial forecasting. Yeah. And I talked to my friend Gary Zukoff, the author of the book The Seat of the Soul, and to get his opinion about it. And he said to me, well, when people try to use their intuition for financial gain, the result will be according to their karma. He brought that up. It's about your karma, that it might not be your karma to make money that way. Or or you may have past life issues around it. I'm kind of inclined to think that from a pure spiritual perspective, it doesn't matter.
How so?
Well, here's my thinking. The Bhagavad Gita, one of the great spiritual texts of all time, and you know what it's about? It's about a warrior who is lined up in the battlefield of and the two opposing armies are ready to go into war. And Arjuna, the warrior, says, wait a second. He said, these are my relatives. Why would I be going into battle against them? And then it's revealed that his charioteer, Krishna, is actually the incarnation of Vishnu, the deity. And he reveals himself in all of his glory to Krishna. And he says, don't worry. He says, you have to do your duty. He says, you didn't make life and you can't destroy life. Only I can do that. So just do what you have to do. And so here, one of the great spiritual texts of humanity is urging this warrior to go in and kill his own relatives. So if that's okay, surely making money ought to be okay.
I don't know. All I know, well, first of all, Ingo Swann did occasionally indulge in a little bit of, pick six or whatever it was, and apparently made some small amounts of money. Yeah. You had Uri Geller, who apparently tried to make a whole lot more money because that's more of his nature, and temporarily lost his abilities. So what was that about? So... aren't those kind of, to me, those are, or you had Edgar Casey, who was busy giving readings for stockbrokers, making them a ton of money. It seems to me that that's more of like an okay thing. It's sort of like healing, only financial healing. But if you try to use it for yourself, you've now abused the power.
abused the power. Well, there's that.
There's that.
That's
I know.
a judgment.
I know that.
And it's very common in our culture. There's no doubt that people have judgments about money. After all, in the Bible, it says there's the whole thing about a rich man getting into heaven is like a camel passing through the eye of a needle.
Right.
We're very judgmental about money, and I think every human has judgments and has emotions and has attitudes about money. What I'm suggesting, though, is that, at least in theory, I'm certainly not speaking about myself, although I can say I offer this video series to people at no charge. Mm-hmm. I hope, occasionally I hope some people will donate to help defray costs, and maybe one day I'll find a big donor, which would be really nice, and I could promote it more and get more people in. But I'm fortunate because my wife and I have another business, so we're able to do this. But everybody has to kind of work those things out for themselves. It seems to me, and some people, like let's take Uri Geller. The truth of the matter is, at this point in his life, he's a multimillionaire from doing his psychic work.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. Right. He didn't really have to. But that was. There's an example that maybe disproves what you're talking about. I know him. He clearly enjoys his money, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
However, if he enjoys money and feels good with it, then what was it that turned into a losing streak? What was that about?
Well, I guess my friend Gary Zukoff would say that was his karma.
But then, what is karma exactly? I mean,
that's a deep one.
Yeah.
That's a very deep one. I mean, and it's a very important question to ask. I should do a whole interview with people just about
that. Might be
karma.
A good
thing. But minimally speaking, at least my knowledge of karma, I do not claim to be an expert, but it has something to do with conditioning from present and perhaps previous lifetimes.
Right.
Like maybe in a previous lifetime you were very wealthy and the neighbors decided to poison you to get your money. So you now have a thing about if I'm wealthy, I don't want people to know about it, or I can't show my wealth.
Right. But that's what I'm talking about is a little bit more. You got the up and the down in the same lifetime.
Yeah.
So is that really karma, or is that some other thing that's at work? And and I'm just suggesting that I think, for example, what Marty is doing with the APP, the Applied Precognition
Yes, and I encourage our viewers to check out the videos with Marty.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating. I mean, obviously, I'm doing it because I'm trying to learn something there, and I know there's something to be learned there that's different from what I do a lot of the rest of the time. But there's something. And my initial thought was he was doing it to kind of go back. It's the proof that psychic ability is real. And the best way to show that is with money. However, I've spoken with him, and I really think that he wants to use the money to build with it, which is a little bit of an extension off of that. And the question is, will whatever that spiritual gift, because it's not just a plain old skill. It's got elements of a gift or an ability to connect with what you're calling spirit or the matrix or that universal consciousness, which will give if you know how to connect is a bad word, to unify with it.
Well, now there are many psychologists and spiritual teachers these days who talk about money as a form of energy, and they suggest pretty much that we live in a universe of incredible abundance, and it's available to us when we are in harmony with it.
Right. I agree with that. Money isn't anything anyway. It's just it's a symbol.
And perhaps someday in the future we will have a civilization that doesn't even have money.
Yes. And if we connect maybe with some other civilizations that don't use money, apparently, then maybe we'll learn something.
I mean, I do know people who think of like the world of Star Trek, where we all have our transporters and we can just beam in everything we need.
I think that once you start looking for proof of work, which is really what that is, you start to accept other people, you start to give more than you expect to receive, and it doesn't matter because there is abundance. That's the point where you get rid of money.
Yeah. Well, and then the flip side of that are skeptical people who sometimes come to me say, well, you're a parapsychologist. If you're so psychic, and I don't claim to be, but that's what they say, if you're so psychic, how come you're not rich?
Oh, well, that's the classic question. I mean, I get asked that all the time. Yeah, how come you haven't, won the lottery? Yeah. Well, number one, I haven't won it. Number two, I really don't try because I'm afraid that if I do try, that I will be putting my resources into something that is 100% narcissistic. And by the way, anytime you're doing that, if you want to go into a different realm of good and evil, which is a scary place to go in this type of conversation, but if you go into good and evil, evil is connected to your physicality, always. Money is a direct link to physical, any type of physical pleasure or narcissism or ego or any of the sins, if you want to go down the evil list. Which is why if you're going to stay spiritual on the good side, maybe don't go there with money.
And, well, I mean, Jesus told his disciples to give up all their possessions. Give it to the poor.
Yeah, maybe not, but not all of them. but the sense of gift, I think, is what gets missing when you're doing a trade.
Well, once again, Nancy, we've just scratched the surface, I think, of a deep topic, but it's one that probably deserves a good conversation, and that's what we've had. So,
thank you.
Thank you, too, for opening up and being with me. I know this was not one of our usual pre-planned interviews where I've read your book and I follow along with your book. This has really been
this is a pleasure.
Spontaneous.
I appreciate it.
I enjoy our time together immensely.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you for being with us.